In this training video, we're going to look at pivot tables and the use of filter pages within pivot tables. So looking at the screen in front of me, I've got raw pivot table data showing some business information going from a sales rep to sales price. It's got a product, region, who bought the product. Now if I go to my pivot table, which has already been created, I can now see some information in my pivot table itself. So if I look at the field list, now this is on the Analyze tab in versions 2016 and 13 and the Options tab in 2010. So I'm going to click on the Analyze tab, field list, and I can see I've got sales rep and product in the row area on the left hand side, purchaser in the columns area, and in the values I've got sales quantity. So quite standard business data. Now I might want to filter by some of this information. So for example, region at the present isn't used. I might want to use this as a filter to look at different information from different regions. So I'm going to drag regions into the filter. So right now I can see regions in the filter and I've got all regions under the filter at present. I'm going to close the field list down for now. Now in the filter area under all, I can now click the drop down arrow and I can say, okay, I don't want to filter by everything. If you click select multiple items, you can then choose how to filter from the filter area. So in this example, I don't want to use all. I want to use the two norths, northeast and northwest. So I'm going to click on those two and then OK. Now that gives me the information for the two north regions I was looking for, northeast and northwest. Now in this example, I'm going to change it back to all. And that takes me back to all my data with no filter. Now what someone might request of you in a working situation is for, instead of filtering for the regions in the pivot table itself, they might request that each of the regions has its own pivot table in its own worksheet. Now this can be done, and this can be done from the filter area of a pivot table. So what we're going to do now is click on either part, the regions or the all, and when you've clicked on one of these areas in the filter area of the pivot table, under the Analyze tab, which again is for 16 and 13 versions and the Options is 2010, you'll see under the Analyze for this version, Options, and I can now click the arrow next to Options, which is in the pivot table section of the ribbon. So there's a little options called Options, and I click the arrow, and I've got a very useful feature called Show Report Filter Pages. Now this can be very, very useful for showing all the regions in their own separate pages. So I'm now going to click this option, and you can see now a box appears, and this box says show all report filter pages of. So the of means whatever is in the filter area. So if I had happened to filter by multiple areas within the filter area, I would have multiple choices in this box in front of myself now. I've only got regions because I've only got one item in the filter area. So I can only show the individual pages right now of the regions. But this is what we're aiming to do. All I'm going to do now is click OK. And what I want you to do then is just look down the bottom of the screen to see what happens when we click OK. So the pivot table itself and the data from the pivot table will be broken down into separate worksheets for each of the individual regions. So now we can see, if I look down the bottom, Central, Northeast, Northwest, and if I look to the top, I can see the filter is on Central. Northeast sheet, it's showing Northeast. So what pivot tables have really cleverly done here is now broken down into individual sheets for each region and providing its own separate filter. So quite a clever way of using pivot tables if you ever wanted to break down the data from one pivot table into individual pages, as they call it, filter pages. So this completes the example of pivot table filter pages.